Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Women Talking Money podcast. My name is Gretchen from Magenta Financial Planning, and today I'm joined by Lewis Roddy. Lewis is a business development manager at Timeline, a DFM and fintech business with a mission to help millions of people retire with confidence. Lewis currently looks after the Northwest, West Scotland and Northern Ireland regions, implementing cutting-edge technology into advisor processes, helping them to provide the best service to their clients. He started out life as an apprentice at a FTSE 250 investment platform and has gained invaluable experience on investment platforms, asset management and relationship management along his journey. Away from work, he enjoys spoiling a nice walk by playing golf, and he frequently runs with his friends and cycles, mainly to counteract his enjoyment for eating out. So welcome, Lewis, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Gretchen. Absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fab. So do you just want to fill some of those gaps in or talk a little bit about your role with Timeline so that people listening know a little bit more about you?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So, I've been at Timeline now about 18 months, joined from AJ Bell, where I was previously, and started out life at Timeline. We were sort of restructuring our advisor success team, so the sort of post-sale support element. So started out life at Timeline as an advisor success manager, working alongside Will Church in the Southwest, Mike Parker in the Midlands, and Kate Phillips over in the City and East regions, and sort of quickly sort of got running with some real good experience, servicing advisors, helping advisors with that post-sale element of how to actually implement Timeline, their portfolios, as well as all of the fantastic tech that we have alongside it. And really starting to build relationships with advisors in those respective regions. I then sort of got the opportunity earlier this year to take over the Northwest as the business development manager, which includes sort of West Scotland from Glasgow and everything west, and Northern Ireland as well. So it's been a whirlwind of a journey, and hopefully we can dig into a bit more of that throughout the podcast.
Absolutely. So quite a broad, as they always give you such broad amounts of regions. I'm always really shocked, like, oh yeah, I'm in charge of like Scotland, which is massive, or like, that's crazy. So lots of travel for you, Lewis, as well.
Lots of travel. Luckily, I'm based in Manchester, so the Northwest, is slightly less travelling than my days coming to see you, Gretchen, or travelling to Cornwall or over to London and sort of Far East. But yeah, there's still a lot of travelling, a lot of flying back and forth from Northern Ireland and up to Scotland as well. So, but I love it. It's what I've always wanted to do. I always had my eye on that business development role, during my time at AJ Bell, and yeah, it's sort of everything I'd wished for.
Okay, so as you know, on this podcast, we're talking about money, and roles are reversed a bit. We're talking to people who maybe sometimes talk about money with other people, but so it's on to you, spotlight on you today. Tell me a little bit. I mean, to start off with, you're not that old anyway. So when you were being told about money was not that long ago. But what did you hear about money, when you were growing up as a family? Was it openly talked about? Those are the sort of things that I'm really interested in.
Yeah. You say it's not that long ago, Gretchen, but I really, before meeting you today, I was sort of trying to think of a quote, or something striking that I can remember from my childhood, but I really can't. I think as a family, we spoke about topics around money, but never sort of dived into the nitty gritty of earnings or savings or any of the actual figures. But I think the biggest thing that I remember from my childhood around that topic is, if you want something, you've got to work for it. And this comes from a place of I grew up in a decent area. I always had, everything all of the essentials and some of the wants, nice birthday presents and Christmas presents. And I don't think as a sort of child you realise, because you've not had to work for it, what that looks like, in the real world. You just sort of get, your Nintendo Wii and the Wii Fit that, I've always wanted for Christmas. It just turns up at your door. But sort of looking back, I think that sort of work ethic that my mum and dad had, to give my younger sister and myself everything we sort of needed and some of the wants. And that's my biggest takeaway of we didn't necessarily talk about money specifically, but the work ethic to get that. If you want something or need something, to work for it. My mum worked 3 jobs when I grew up. My dad would take on extra hours over the weekends and work away. So it really helped instill this idea of not knowing what they earn, but knowing that if you do truly want something or you need something to help with that family unit, then you need to work for it.
Do you remember being taught anything about kind of saving, or the way, like, did you get pocket money or that type of thing?
Yeah, I did. I got money seemingly from all angles, as we'll probably speak about. But, my mum and dad would give me pocket money. Both sort of sets of grandparents had some premium bonds set away for, Christmases and stuff like that. And it was always, save for a rainy day, the usual stuff that you get told. As we'll probably come to find out a bit later on, it's probably not something I've lived by throughout my whole life, the saving for a rainy day element. But certainly as a kid, I would be told to perhaps not buy everything, I want that week, and stick some money away for something slightly bigger, but with probably minimal success, to be honest, on that front.
Okay, all right. Well, before we get on to things like that, then seems like we've got a story to dig out there. Just tell me, like, what was your first job? Did you work as a teenager, or was AJ Bell the first kind of intro into working environment?
Not at all, and I think that's probably digging up, part of that story of, my mum and dad saying, we'll give you everything you need, but if you want something extra, go and work for it, right? So my first job, as with most people, at around age 12, was a paper round. Managed to find quite a lucrative one, where I deliver 12 papers a day for 5 days, at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning, and I earned a whopping, hold on to your chair here, Gretchen, £11.50 a week. So inflation adjusted, that's actually £16.75. I went on just before here to work that out. But it sort of took me 30 minutes door to door. And it was barely work. I've always been an early riser. Just went out on my BMX with my little bag around me, doing bunny hops off the curbs and all of those sort of things. And yeah, sort of felt like a millionaire in school, buying as many Lucasades and as many packs of cookies and stuff that, I ever wanted. But a bit sort of further along the timeline, if you like, pardon the pun. My first sort of proper job was at a chip shop at around age 14. So I handed my CV out to loads of sort of shops and things in the local area. I managed to land a job as a fryer at a chip shop, which I do have to say didn't last too long as a fryer, because the owner found out I wasn't 16 and that it was a massive safety hazard to have a 14-year-old next to a boiling hot fryer full of fat. So I was moved into the potato room, where I was much safer with a potato peeler and a bucket of water. I was paid £1 per 20 kilogram bag, and I'd get through about 10 bags an hour. And sort of every day, I think it was 5-6 days a week, I'd be doing sort of 10 to 15 bags a day. So, taking home 70-75 quid in a brown envelope at the end of every week was pretty nice. Yeah.
I bet you're called on Sundays still.
I am a nifty potato peeler, Gretchen, I do have to say. I've lost the technique slightly. I used to be very, very fast. But yeah, there was a few cuts on the hands to show that as well. It certainly didn't, took a while to get to that level. But again, that sort of 70 odd quid didn't last forever. I sort of went from having £10 a week to 75. So all of the golf balls and golf clubs and skateboards and all of the stuff that I was buying the 2 years earlier were now just slightly nicer iterations, and I was walking around in new trainers and clothes, and I was the man around the playground, with my 75 quid in my pocket.
So it was generally spent?
It was spent every single week. And there's a funny story, and this is the sort of one that I think you're digging for, is even sort of before that and throughout this period, I'd go to the car boot with my nana and granddad every weekend. And my granddad would generally give me, a £10 note just to sort of keep me happy and keep me busy while he was looking for, tools and builders stuff. And the story is, and we still laugh about this today with my mum and dad, that £10 had to be spent, in my brain. If I hadn't spent that £10 by the time I leave that market on a Saturday afternoon, I'd failed. So my dad cleared his garage out a couple of years ago, and it's just full of, crap that I'd managed to accumulate, over 5, 6, 7 years of going to markets and car boots. So shows you from an early age that, I was living the lavish life even with lower values of money at the time.
Okay, so now do you have a budgeting system that you use now that you think about a bit more?
Yeah, I do. As I've sort of gotten older, I feel as though I'm more sensible with the figures that I have, and I can describe my budgeting system quite simply. She is blonde. She's about 5'5", and she's called Georgia. She's my girlfriend. So she's generally she's the money person in the relationship. She's absolutely fantastic with money. And, I have matured a lot since my days of going to car boots and spending every penny I had. But I think the sort of shared mantra that we have now, and I mentioned just before we jumped on, of the house purchase and things like that as long as, our bills are covered, we've saved something for a rainy day and perhaps invested something for even further down the line, then we can have that bit of pocket money to enjoy and to actually buy things that we want and enjoy some of the fruits of our labor. I'm generally quite generous. I like to enjoy, the fruits. So making sure everything's covered, and then, splurging a little bit and enjoying some of the niceties.
And will this be the first, so the house purchase, does this mean it's the first time you'll have a mortgage and have that kind of debt?
Yeah, exactly. It certainly is. So we're renting at the minute. We're in an apartment at the moment. So we've had quite a good, experience of bills and the real world. So yeah, I think now it's time to take the leap and start to build something that's ours, rather than paying off the landlord's mortgage.
Yeah, and it's an interesting time to be buying your first, first property. Mortgage rates super high, property market isn't, being that favourable to people. So have you it sounds like Georgia's the one, doing all the spreadsheet management around this, but, it's a big step, isn't it? So have you really, I guess were the key things that you had to think about when you were deciding to do it? And do you want to share something around that? Although it wasn't on my questions because it's related to something that's going on with you, but.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we've learned a hell of a lot. It's similar to renting in a way that, your rent isn't the only expenditure that comes out, when you move out of your family home. That was one we learned a couple of years ago when we moved into this place. But I think with the house, it was at first, just saving a little bit. And then it was remembering why you're saving a little bit when you could buy, I could have that instant dopamine hit of buying some new golf clubs or some new trainers or, all of the stuff I would have done previously. But then remembering why you're doing it, and that quickly, mounts up to a figure that's respectable. And then we started looking at properties on the market. And I think you're right. The interest rates at the moment seem to be coming down, but, we're in quite high. But I suppose there's never a right time, is there, to buy a house. And it's I think hopefully over the 30, 40, 50 years that it takes us to pay the mortgage off, that they'll average out at a normal rate. And yeah, I think it was just a mindset shift of needs over wants. We need to move out of this place. There's nothing wrong with it, but we want to have a place of our own. So it's just delaying that gratification of what we can do now, and just remembering how nice it will be when we get into our new place and we can do everything how we want, and all of that stuff. So there's been a few learning curves, a few extra bits that we perhaps didn't budget for, but luckily enough we have Georgia, and we're able to we're in a position where we're able to save quite nicely.
Yeah, good. And as you say, you'll have 5 years or whatever you fix for a high rate, and then hopefully the next 5 will be at a lower rate, and that it will all equal out. But I think also it's been a real shock to the system for people, everyone, whatever generation, whether in your 20s, 30s, 40s or 50s, because we've had 10 years of like really, really low rates. And really it's only, my parents, so that, people in their 60s, who and 70s who can remember when the rates were actually double what they are now, if not more. And those 10 years, last 10 years, we've been really, 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 we've adjusted our lives to something that was those rates being so low. I think that's something that's really caught a lot of people out.
Yeah, that's it. And we have fixed for 5 purely down to the budgeting decision that if we can afford this now, even if rates drop, at least we know we can afford it. Hopefully we'll earn a little bit more in that time. So yeah, it's just about being ready, isn't it? And being able to delay that gratification and secure a rate that we at least know we'll be able to pay in 5 years' time still.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because my next question was going to be around debt management. And I think that's quite relevant, really, because at least you fixing 5 years, that, and it feels like Georgia's she's the kind of girl who wants to know, like, we know what we're going to pay for the next 5 years, and we're not going to have to go through this trauma of like remortgaging again in 2 because and we don't know what's going to be. At least you like set yourself. We know what's happening for the next 5 years. But what about other debt? Like, sound like, I wouldn't want to say, I don't want to use this term, but boys and their toys tend to mean that things can get a bit over the top, want the new fancy, in your situation, I might say golf club, but in my brother-in-law's situation, it'd be the next size television up would be a big purchase that he really wants to do. And those are the sort of splurges when you're at your starting point in your career, when you're not, when you're maybe your spending is almost at the level of what you're bringing, that can bring kind of debt issues. Is credit card something you've used? Is it something that's part of your regular way of managing money?
Yeah, I think first of all, yes, credit. I've got a credit card, and I sort of take it back a step. First, I was in college studying business economics and financial studies, and my economics teacher, as well as my financial studies teacher, both said, I would recommend that you get a credit card and pay your petrol on it every month. That's something I've just done, since being 17, 18, when I was allowed a credit card. So I have had bits and bobs on credit cards, but I think I've always been really sensible with debt. I think being in this industry from age 18, and especially now in the sort of more focus on the financial planning element and having our own tech that does it at Timeline, you sort of caught in 2 minds, and it really doesn't help. I mean, it helps massively, but it makes this sort of angel and devil even stronger on your shoulders, because you really do know what you should be doing to have the successful financial plan. But the devil is, still there. But like I say, I think with the budgeting stuff, I have luckily always managed to stay relatively out of debt. There's always been bits and bobs here. Bought a laptop at 19 on 0% finance and stuff like that. Daft stuff. But luckily, never anything massively life changing, or nothing that I was able to get into.
Nothing that escalated out of control.
Exactly. And I think it goes down to that mantra again of, if you are able to cover, first of all, the needs, I've always had expenses. I had a car at 17, I had insurance, my phone bill, etc. And my mum and dad were quite good at that, giving us the responsibility from day one. If I couldn't pay my phone bill at £20 a month, how am I going to pay a mortgage eventually when I have one? So again, just making sure that those essentials were paid off before splurging. So not to go under that £0 in the bank balance and go into the minus. And luckily I've had some success with that. But yeah, the financial planning element definitely helps because I know what I should be doing, and that angel's getting stronger and stronger every time I make the right decision.
Really quickly, before we move on to the next bit, do you think that your economics and financial services, or financial advice like tutors, they were doing that because it's a good way to build up like credit history? Is that what they were kind of advocating?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It was a way, I think someone asked them, we were all turning 18, we started having cars, and I remember a sort of another student saying to my economics teacher, do you think we should get a credit card? And he was he's a very shrewd guy, very smart guy, and he sort of said, stay away from the bad debt, but if you can build your credit score up to a point where when you want a mortgage or you want to finance a car, you're in a much better position. And still rings true to this day, doesn't it? My sister has just turned 18, and I told her to do the exact same thing, and we are now getting her on a journey to start investing in her own ISA. So I think it's a sort of building block, isn't it? It's a foundational principle that it's no good having loads invested and having loads in the minus. You may as well start with, at least at ground zero, make sure that if you can manage that in an effective way and then start building sort of wealth on top of that. Because it can be a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, can't it? When you start going into more and more debt and then it spirals out of control. So yeah, it was all about building credit and building probably the discipline to be able to continue doing that, because it's so easy to pay your petrol off. You put £100 a month in petrol and then you just leave it and don't pay it off, and you've got an extra £100 from your pay slip. So it's the credit score building, it's the discipline to be paying your credit balance off, and all of the other stuff. So yeah, it was a good lesson to learn at 18.
Definitely. And I mean, I think it's a great thing. I think the biggest thing, I mean, the credit score thing's really important. And I think that we do get a whole load of people now who've just not built up any credit score, really struggling to kind of get on the ladder or get a loan when they need it for something, but for me, that the fact it's about that discipline, because I certainly 18, I did not have that discipline. No, none of that discipline. So I think it's because I can imagine, and it would be a scary thing, I imagine, as a kind of parent of sort of aiding you to get this credit card. It's like you can see the benefits of it, and if they're going to use it properly, then that's what it's going to be, really, really good. But then you could also see how it could kind of spiral. So, and especially now in a world where credit cards, they'd be quite good at going, here, have another £1,000.
Yeah.
Here, have another £1,000. So I think it's a great tip, and I think it's really, really good. I just think it's like, definitely it's about discipline and how it's managed. And maybe if there are any parents listening thinking, oh, that might be a good idea, but oh my God, does this mean they're going to get into loads of debt? Maybe it's just something where there's definitely a cap on that, and thinking about how you could control that, because I would say not every 18-year-old is taking an economics and finance degree and aware of, or able to just even be aware of, like, hang on, the temptation is high, right, Lewis? The temptation to keep that £100 is really high.
Tell me about it. It is, and I was speaking to my sister about this, being at that age, and it's getting rid of that idea of keeping up with the Joneses, or however you want to phrase it, of what other people are doing with their money. At 18, I had mates that were in much nicer cars, were in, going on nicer holidays, that they were paying with, by whatever means. But, and we're all guilty of it. We've all bought a pair of trainers and not paid it back, and then had to pay for it at some later date. But it's just, again, remembering that founding principle of, if I can't do this and I can't be disciplined with this, when I do start making decent money, in my late 20s, early 30s in my career, how am I going to put money away into my retirement pot, or how am I going to invest for a rainy day then? So it's starting off small, and financial planning technology allows us to see this in real time and able to forecast that, and show that small changes do make a big difference. I've got maybe 30 years to retirement, hopefully, maybe a bit less if I win the lottery, but I can start to see now what my financial life will look like if I'm in debt and not putting money away, compared to if I'm putting a little bit away and I stay out of the red. So yeah, it's certainly a founding principle from me, the debt side.
So Lewis, have you ever made a financial decision that you really regret, and how have you how did you handle it?
Yeah, I certainly have. So we mentioned AJ Bell slightly. I left AJ Bell sort of halfway through the apprenticeship, and being the entrepreneurial 19-year-old at the time that I was, I had the great idea to start an investment property sourcing business. So I would be sourcing investment properties for investors, a lot of the time overseas investors, to going to see the property, looking at how much they could buy it for, how much it would take to do it up, and what the end value would look like, and figuring out if it would be a half decent investment for someone. Obviously, not financial advice, but obviously not the investment side. You're in a sort of a bit of a grey area, really. But I set that business up and put everything I had, every penny, into that business, and all of the sort of graft that I had in my body as well, and really wanted to make it a legitimate business first of all, and fully compliant, as much as I could. It was very clear that it wasn't financial advice, but I wanted to be as compliant as possible. So I spent money on branding. I spent money on getting a solicitor to write a real contract up between myself and the investor, doing everything by the book. I spent thousands, really, so, a few £1,000s. And this was at a time, late 2019. We all know what came, 4, 5, 6 months later with COVID. We talk about interest rates now, but interest rates in the property market were in an even worse position then, meaning that this business that I just set up with, the value add of me going out to properties, finding low price, undervalued properties, and hopefully adding value, was sort of no longer viable. So it was a really sort of sticky time, to be honest. I'd also slipped 3 discs in my back in the same period of time. So I couldn't go out to viewings, I couldn't meet investors, and I was sort of struggling physically and mentally, if you like. And we talk about financial decisions that we regret. It was a financial decision and probably a life decision, leaving a FTSE 250 business, about to finish my apprenticeship, but I thought I knew better. And like I say, it was all building a business that never amounted to anything. But when we look at what I learned from it, and that was the sort of second part of your question, I think it was financially, probably not much, because I really did believe in what I was doing. There was certainly a value add there, and it was certainly a business that in other times probably would have done quite well. But I think learning from it, that money was spent. So learning from it, on the other side of a personal growth element, was probably that confidence that I gained from the first few months of it, meeting investors, that had, hefty sums to invest into properties and were very serious about their portfolio. The resilience to keep going even when, a deal didn't go my way. And just being that sort of building up this personable attitude and being easy to speak to about finance. People were really telling me about their situation, which, bodes very well with what we're speaking about today. So would I do it differently? Would I go back and not do it? Probably not, because although I spent quite a bit of money doing it, I was doing it for the right reasons. I wanted to be completely compliant and not botch something, and then some recourse comes around and I get stung. But But I think overall it taught me a lot about myself and about how to conduct business at times. And something I'd probably do all over again if the situation was slightly different and we didn't see a global pandemic on the horizon.
What's really interesting that what you've taken away is I'd still do it. I still learnt from it, and maybe it gives you a stronger, as you say, resilience and experience is a great thing to be able to apply to anything we take forward. But at the time, like it's easy now to say that, but at the time, that must have been really tough. And like, were you able to talk to people about that? I've also spoken to another person who'd set up just taken on a really big lease in London, like literally a couple of months before the pandemic hit, and they just literally didn't use that, and it nearly broke their business. But I think, yeah. So were you able to talk, able to share with people about that? I don't know if you were with Georgia at the time or not, but if not, other people.
Yeah,
who could guide you.
Wasn't with Georgia, but she probably, in hindsight, would have been a fantastic person to turn to if I could have found her, a few years earlier. But I think looking back, everything's fond, isn't it? Even your worst times are probably silver lined in some way. There's always a sort of fond memory from any time. But yeah, at the time, it was probably the darkest period of my life so far. Like I say, especially with the injury. From years playing rugby and lifting in the gym with my back, I was bedbound. So not only did I have a sort of failing business that I'd put loads of money into that I couldn't do much about, but I also wasn't able to see my friends as much. I was completely bedbound and not able to walk, far at all. So at the time, it really just felt like I was back at square one. I'd experience aside and all the other benefits I'd had from my, short working career before that, all of the money that I'd saved, all of the birthdays that I'd gone without presents to stash away, knowing that I was going to hopefully do something with that, felt a bit wasted. And I'd gone from, this amazing confidence and building a brand and building, this reputable business around myself that I was setting up, and the confidence of speaking to people that had loads of money to invest and them finding me, really personable and referring me on to, all of that, to then being bedbound and not speaking to many people was really, really tough. I spoke to family and friends, and, family certainly helped me with the money side. My mum and dad were helpful over that period. But yeah, I do feel as though it was a real dark time, and I really reset to square one, and then needed to, get a job ultimately after that to just start earning some money again once I was recovered.
Really interesting. The reason why, I'm talking to you in this month that's going to be for International Men's Day is because, financial well-being is a massive keystone to like our mental health and well-being. It's pretty important, isn't it? So I think that, I guess, I can only imagine how tough it was. And I think, there are so many problems with and challenges with, certainly with male mental health, that I think if we could just be a little bit more open about saying, do you know what, yeah, this happened to me and I was pretty crap and I was, I was in a really dark place, but it's possible to like get it back, and it's possible to like just be almost moving in to my first house. I think it's an amazing story, Lewis. So thank you for sharing with me.
Yeah, I think that's it. And it's all about speaking to people, isn't it? I think as men, and it's quite on topic, sometimes we feel as though we can't speak. But I certainly do think conversations, even like this, Gretchen, and conversations we've had personally, conversations I've had with friends and family are really the reason that you're able to get up in the morning and go at it again. If you were sort of sat in bed and just thinking to yourself and not able to speak to anyone, I think that's probably the worst thing to do. A problem shared is a problem halved, and you actually don't know who is in a position to help you at some point. And if you speak to as many people as you can that you trust, you sort of build this relationship with people that they know that you trust them, and therefore they can trust you with similar things. So just opening that conversation up, really, you'd be surprised what some people face who won't tell you until you've perhaps showed some vulnerability by asking them for advice first.
I was going to say, it's about being brave enough to go like, oh no, this is what's happening, and I kind of, have you got any guidance? And yeah, it's mad how many people we're in contact with that you just, at least if you just show like a little chink in that armor, then people are going to want to help, So yeah, really important. Thank you. So we're going to run out of time, so we'll skip forward a couple of questions because that's what always happens with our conversations.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, we'll flip right to my end question. So can you think of something that was a really like joyful money experience that you might want to share? So that could be something you've spent your money on, which really means a lot to you, or you think back and you're like, yeah, I was so proud to be able to do that, those type of things.
Yeah, I think probably not going to surprise you here, Gretchen, but, and we've mentioned it a few times, but the sort of house purchase that we're going through at the minute was crossing that deposit, the mark in my lifetime ISAs and the savings accounts that amalgamated to the value of our deposit was probably the biggest feeling of achievement that I've had yet. And I think, first of all, it's, again, ignoring that instant gratification and dopamine hit that you get when you're buying a new pair of shoes or whatever it is, whatever your sort of vice is. Because you've spent so long saving, you've put a little bit away here and there and some big chunks when you can, that you sort of one day look, and Georgia says to me, we've got X amount for the house, and you think, right, we can find a house now, or that's the kitchen done, or that's, the bathroom done. That for me at the minute is an amazing feeling, because we have ignored all of the wants, not all of the wants, because George will tell you that I've still bought golf clubs in the past 6 months, but we've been sensible enough to put, as much money away as we physically can. We've still enjoyed, our lives as well in the process, but we've been relatively sensible, and there's something huge to look forward to when we do move in sort of towards the end of the year. So yeah, just so grateful for that at the minute, and it just feels like a fantastic achievement, especially looking back at, less than 5 years ago when I was sort of bedbound and unable to move. So it's nice to look back and think we've come quite a long way.
Yeah, how amazing. Honestly, really, really exciting. I'm so excited for you both. Okay, so, and this is a big question. It's a question that's often asked of people as they get older, but I think financial freedom now can have different stages in life and mean different things to people. It's got slightly different context than it used to. So what would you say financial freedom means to you?
Yeah, it's something, again, it's changed massively in the last, say, 6-7 years of me in my working career. We look at all over the internet, financial freedom means buying a Lamborghini at age 23 because you're Forex trading, or, all of these gimmicks that are coming up. But, and, I've definitely been a part of them, caught in the side hustle hype and trying to be a millionaire before age 25 and all that stuff. But I think true financial freedom now means, to a more mature me, is that being able to be overly generous, to be able to have most of your wants and not have to worry about the future, not have to worry about the conservation element of and the fear of running out, not to the tune of going into the Bentley garage and not looking at the price tag, but to enjoy your day to day without having to worry. And that financial planning element has been huge for that with me. We sat down, and obviously I've got access to the timeline planning software. Me and George went through it, and it was just so refreshing understanding if we continue doing this, we're going to be in a position where we can treat our families to a holiday, or we can, buy each other nice gifts, and we can enjoy some of the luxuries in life, because we have worked so hard, not only in our work but in our personal lives, to get the discipline and build up the processes that make sure we can achieve that. So I think it is the generosity and self-treating that, but without having the worry. And there isn't a figure on it, is that there never will be. The goalposts are always changing. But that is what financial freedom means to me.
Thank you, Lewis, and thank you for sharing today, being with me. It's been really, really great. I've enjoyed our conversation, and yeah, I hope you have too.
I've really enjoyed it, Gretchen, and it's refreshing that you've got a platform here that people can be open and honest about talking about such a taboo topic. So thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Lewis.
Great. Cheers.